Hi, welcome to You Didn't Get the Memo Show. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray. Guys, as always, I have a fantastic show for you today. My guest is awesome. And I mean, really and truly awesome. Energy off the chain. But we're going to be really talking about, owning your stuff. I mean, taking ownership. And this is around education. And so I am excited to be able to have someone of such depth who's going to be able to talk to us about where he came from, where he's at, where he's going, but also to give you guys some nuggets as well. I want to say to all of you who are watching today, thank you so much for being here and for tuning in. Today's show is pre-recorded. However, if you have questions, be sure and place them in the chat, and we'll be willing to try to get to you and do our very best to respond back to you. I'm tongue tied this morning, you guys. So, listen, I want to also say to all of you who are nationally and internationally, be sure, guys, and change your translation. So, if you have questions, that we can answer it. As always, like I said, have a great show. And I want to welcome to the show Dr. Ricky Shabazz. Dr. Shabazz, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to get started and talk with you.
Gloria, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Looking forward to the discussion, and I'm sure there are going to be some nuggets in this conversation.
Oh, no question. Absolutely no question. So here's the thing. I could have rattled off your entire CV, but one of the things I like for my guests to do is to really talk about themselves. What's your backstory? So I'm going to punt to you and say, let's start with you telling the viewers about who Dr. Shabazz is.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. My name is Ricky Shabazz. I have the honor and privilege, and I am the proud president of San Diego City College, the fifth oldest community college in the state of California, located in downtown San Diego, a highly urban area, serving students really from all over the country. And how I got my start, my mother had me at a relatively young age. I was the first person in my family to go to college, took community college classes as a high school student, and went to UC Davis undergrad, top 10 public university in California, located in Northern California. Went there and really was in the right place at the right time. And I come to you all as a product of great teaching and an even greater product of mentoring. And so my senior year of college, I was very active as a student, wrote for the student newspaper, played athletics, started a student organization, and was working in outreach. And there wound up being a job in outreach, the assistant director of admissions, had some help to prepare, again, mentors, and wound up being hired one of the youngest administrators in the history of the University of California as the assistant director of admissions. They sent me back to Southern California, grew up in Pasadena, California. My father's side of the family is from Texarkana, Texas. My mother's side of the family is from Shreveport and New Orleans. So as Beyonce would say, I got that Louisiana, Texas thing going on. But was very fortunate to be hired straight out of undergrad as a 22-year-old as the assistant director of admissions. When I graduated from UC Davis, went on to get my master's degree and my doctorate from Cal State San Bernardino. Worked for UC Davis for about 10 years in the admissions office, and ultimately jumped around the jobs and landed at Compton Community College. And I always wanted to work at a community college because nationally, the majority of Black students and certainly Latino students actually start their college career at a community college. And when I was working at UC Davis, I primarily wanted to work with underrepresented students. So that means a number of things: first generation, low income, formerly incarcerated. I mean, we say in the community college that we admit 100% of the people who apply, and we do. And so I found myself at Compton College right around the time that they lost their accreditation and were facing actually closing. And I was able to join a team and build my own team as the director of outreach over a number of different departments. But I'm proud to say that we grew Compton from about 3,000 students to over 15,000. Now, folks, that doesn't happen. Normally, when a college loses its accreditation, the doors close, students don't come. But in the height of the recession from 2007 to about 2014, before I left, we actually grew the college to its largest student population, had one of the largest graduating classes in the history of the school, sent Compton Community College students to colleges, four-year colleges all over the country, and really did some neat things that propelled me to be an expert in what we call enrollment management. So I help colleges grow, I help them complete students. And from there, from Compton, I wound up going over to, so I wound up being the dean of students, went from being the director of outreach to the dean of students at Compton. I completed my doctoral studies while I was at Compton, studied King Drew Medical Magnet, which at the time was the largest and the last remaining traditionally Black high school in LAUSD. So studied that from my undergraduate studies, then moved on to San Bernardino Valley College, where I was the vice president of students, was there for about 3.5, almost 4 years, and then landed in the best college on the planet, my dream come true, downtown San Diego, social justice focused, San Diego Community College, one of the largest colleges that focus on social justice, educational equity. And I've been there. I'm in my 5th academic year, but it'll make 5 years in July of 2022.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So let's go back to something. You just talked about at a time when a college lost its accreditation, how the enrollment grew. It didn't drop off. So, what do you attribute that to? If you had two things, what would you say attributed to this growth? Because look, come on, pump it up and give it to us. What happened? Because somebody is watching this and saying, I want to know, how did you do that?
So it was a number of things, but the number one thing was that I was in the right place at the right time. It was the right group of people. And what I mean by the right time is it was a recession. So all the neighboring, some of the largest community colleges in the country could not grow because there was no funding to grow. And Compton was protected by the state to grow. So all of the Long Beaches, the Pasadenas, the El Caminos, these colleges could not grow because there was not funding. So we were able to recruit students who traditionally would not look at a Compton college. We also had fun doing it. I built an amazing team, largely using a program called Cal Works, which is a welfare to work program. So I
Mm-hmm,
was
mm-hmm.
using Black and Latino women who had children, and we were doing non-traditional outreach. We were going to churches, we were going to swap meets, grocery stores,
Love
and
it.
mind you, it's a recession, right? So we'd be at a swap meet or a transit station, say, look, we know you don't like your job. We know you're looking for additional pay. Come on to college. You've tried everything else. Come on to Compton. Matter of fact, one of the students who I recruited, I mean, literally thousands of students during that time. But one of the ones that comes to mind is a gentleman by the name of Terrence. We were set up outside of the Compton courthouse, and he literally left the courthouse in his jail jumpsuit. And if anybody knows what a jail
Wow.
jumpsuit is, when you get out of jail, you're in this little either white or orange jumpsuit. They give you a little bag with your things, your belongings. And we were set up right outside of the courthouse, and we used to just tell. This was before it was trendy to recruit formerly incarcerated. Now it's big, but Compton was on the forefront of changing the lives of people who were getting out of prison. So we did a lot of non-traditional things that colleges, again, traditionally don't do to recruit
Right.
students.
Right. So that, thinking outside the box. And I think that that's one of the things that has made you so successful. The other thing is that you met people where they were. See
Absolutely.
that, that's the difference. And a lot of times in society, people are so busy up here that they need to understand they need to come down here. And in order to really reach people, what's the saying, people don't care what you know until they know that you actually care, right? and
Absolutely.
and I think that that's what people saw in you. So this is a great way for me to segue into asking you now, in your current role, upcoming on 5 years, right? What do you see as the university president? What do you see at this point as your highest priorities there at San Diego City College?
So the number one thing I do as a college president is hire people, right? Because I don't get to interact with students every day or necessarily staff every day. I'm in meetings, I'm giving speeches, I'm kissing babies, I'm shaking hands. And so it's very important that I hire people who have the same commitment to recruiting formerly incarcerated or military or people who just got out of prison and the host of students that we recruit to our college. And so hiring is the number one thing. I'll be hiring about 24 people this spring. It's a great place to work. It's a place where you could be yourself in every sense of the word. The diversity at my college is amazing. You know, a lot of people talk about diversity and inclusion. When you look at the people who I've been able to hire in my nearly 5 years, literally these folks are from all over the world, every background, every gender, every race, every ethnic group. And we come together and we a family and we have fun changing lives. That really is what it is. So the second most important thing I do, which is really related to number one, is that we change the lives of not only the students who come to our college, but the people who work at our college, and we have fun doing it. You know, I don't have a tie on. I haven't worn a tie in 4 or 5 years. I don't have people call me Dr. Shabazz. I'm just Ricky. We're colleagues, we're family, and we're literally changing the lives of our students. My college has a population that is largely Latinx, over 40%. I think the last number was about 54% of my students are Latinx. We have a large population of Black students, nearly 10% in a city where the population is nearly 6% Black. And so we attract a certain type of an employee. We also attract a certain type of student who is committed and looking for life-changing support. And this commitment to social justice and educational equity is something we carry out into practice.
Right, right, right. So it's good to hear you say that what you look for in people are people who embody, your beliefs, your goals. So that leads me to the word leadership. So when we talk about leadership, what is, in your opinion, is your definition of leadership, and how have you evolved as a leader? Because you've had a lot of different roles, and we all know as we mature, there are certain things that we realize that we probably need to tweak. So in your opinion, what's your definition of a leader, and how have you yourself evolved as an effective leader?
Yeah, so I'm a servant leader. I'm here to serve the people. I'm here to pay a debt for those mentors and those teachers who invested in me. I have an obligation to invest in others, whether that's our students, whether that's employees, whether that's the community. When you look at the word education, which has in its Latin root is educo, and you look at educo in the Latin language, in it is leader. So by definition, if you work in education, you're a leader. And so we say, look, whether you are on a tractor, whether you are in the cafeteria, whether you are in the exec board room, you are equally important. We know that folks are more likely to come in contact to the folks at the front counter. And so we empower folks to make decisions that they know and believe are in the best interest of students. We don't think anyone is more or less important. My administrative staff, at least once a year, we work side by side our facilities and maintenance. I put on the same uniform and we really work. We get out of these offices and these meetings and we go to folks in the front counter and we work side by side. So we know and better understand the impact of the decisions we're making, but also listening. Let me give you an example of that. There's a sister who works in the admissions office, and it was the height of COVID. And we had saw the research about plexiglass, right? So we were like, we're not ordering any plexiglass. And so I was I was walking the halls, as they say. I was walking the yard, and one of my favorite places to go is the admissions office because they always do a great job of decorating. It's just a happy place to go. So I was in admissions, and I was talking to Janae, a sister who works in the admissions office, and I was like just checking in with her, like, hey, how's it going? And they actually had a piece of plexiglass, and I was like, Janae, you know that plexiglass don't really do nothing with COVID, right? And she looked at me and she said, Ricky, this is not about whether or not the plexiglass does something. This is about my personal space and my personal comfort. The hair on my neck stood up. And I went back to my office and I told my entire administrative team, order every piece of plexiglass that you could find. Because if we're asking people to place themselves in harm's way and their families in harm's way by coming to work, and what was going to make them feel comfortable was a $50, $100, $200 piece of plexiglass, then I owed it to them and ultimately to our students, because a happy employee is going to then turn around and treat our students happy, and we did that. And I don't know that Janae really understood that she had that impact, not me. I mean, I got to push the button and say order the stuff, but if she had not had that conversation with me and had the courage to have that conversation with me, then we would have been making people mad unknowingly by not ordering them plexiglass.
Right.
And so that's an example of the type of leadership that I hope that I'm instilling, not only in myself, but the empowering the employees, a frontline, employee who, if I had not struck up a conversation with her as the president, I would have never even had that perspective or that view or that lens.
Right. Well, you know what? We're going to take a really quick break. And when we come back, I'd like for you to talk about, how your school supports students, because as you know, people have all kind of stuff. It's called life. And how do you deal with that? And so I'd love for you to be able to talk about how your school actually supports those students that are enrolled there. So guys, don't you go anywhere. Thank you so much for hanging in here. We're going to be right back.
A lot of people say when you're going somewhere, you don't want to look back. But I beg to differ. I can't lie and say it was easy. I looked at everything in a different light. I realized it started with me going back and getting my high school diploma.
STEM is precise, no margin for error.
Dare to forget that. Dare to have fun with it. Get weird with it. Dare to load their minds. Dare to explore. Dare to STEM. Learn more at She Can STEM.
All right, guys, if you're just tuning in, I'm telling you, I'm having a fantastic, in-depth conversation with Dr. Ricky Shabazz, who is the president of San Diego City College. And you guys, You Didn't Get the Memo show is all about providing you, the viewer, with relevant, fact-based, mainstream information to help you be informed and to make informed decisions. And this is why there's always an eclectic group of guests that are on here. And Dr. Shabazz, if you guys missed the first part of this, I'm just going to tell you, remember, you can always go back and check it out on YouTube, on Facebook, LinkedIn. But I tell you, go back and really listen to this guest, his backstory. I mean, it's really interesting. And there's some of you out there that are probably thinking, oh, it's too late. I can't do this. And, the difference between I can't and I can is you drop off the apostrophe T. Mm-hmm. So let's get real here. But before we went to break, one of the questions that I posed to Dr. Shabazz, or Ricky, as he says, we can call him, was how does your faculty, how is your school supporting the students? Because they have a thing called life. And I can personally say, even going to City College, because I was trying to get a certificate, it just got so difficult trying to manage a job and my family. So I'm just curious, what type of support systems are in place to help these students, Dr. Shabazz?
Yeah, great question. And I could talk about this for hours, so I'm going to try to condense it. But the most important thing that we do to support students is being kind and authentic and caring. We love our students, and very rarely do you hear people talk about love, right? And so we talk a lot about loving our job, loving our college, loving our community, and most importantly, loving our students. There are a number of learning communities, small communities that have various focuses. So we have one that called Emoja that focuses on Black students, another called Puente that focuses in on Latinx, a learning community for our Black and Latino males. And those learning communities, the students take their classes in cohorts together. There are a number of programs around basic needs. So we're helping students with housing, food insecurities. We were one of the first colleges in the country to have a food pantry. Once every 2 weeks, we have a food giveaway. We have an urban farm on our campus. So when I say that my campus is focused in on social justice, it is the activities that we do to support the entire student. And when I say support the entire student, I also, as well as our mental health department, led by Leslie Easton, we embed mental health in spaces where a lot of Black and Brown students wouldn't traditionally access mental health. As a college president from the Black community, as a Black man, I also openly talk about the need for mental health. You cannot be a Black person, a low-income person, a person from various communities that we serve on our campus and not need mental health. But we have to dispel mental health, and I do it by speaking to mental health. We at our college, we're very fortunate. We have something called an employee assistance program where folks can access for free visit to a mental health professional. I mentioned that we have a great mental health department. Matter of fact, I just hired an additional mental health counselor. We embed mental health into our classes. We support basic needs of the student, but I'm going to be honest, it's not enough. We do a lot of fundraising. We're very fortunate to have Jim Senegal of Costco is one of our alums. He's a billionaire. He routinely provides us 6 figures worth of donations where we give students laptops, Wi-Fi hubs. I mean, we're doing a number of things. The most probably important thing that we're working on right now is building student housing, because many of my students, San Diego is a very expensive place to live. So many of my students are couch surfing, are facing homelessness. And so hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years, we were just awarded about a $344,000 grant to begin the process of building student housing. And my goal in terms of legacy before I retire, because I intend to retire from San Diego City College, is to offer not only students, but employees housing. And so we have a plot of land that we plan to build about somewhere between 600 and 1,000 units of housing. And that's going to be so important to offering students and employees access to affordable housing. And so we have a number of programs trying and striving to support the entire student, but frankly, it's not good enough because community colleges are vastly underfunded when you look at the type of students that we serve: Black, Latino, low income, formerly incarcerated, former welfare. The students come with needs that frankly exceed the abilities to support them to the degree that we would like to. But I am so proud of the things and the efforts that my college does have underway to help students.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about the piece around housing, because I've often wondered, why was there not more of a focus around community college housing? I mean, if you go to a 4-year school, there's housing, so it should it not be the same or offer some of those things? So never quite got that. And that's exciting to hear you say that this is a focus, and with your drive it's going to happen. So there's no question about that. And thank you for sharing that. You guys, you heard it, as they say, from the horse's mouth. So y'all need to get busy and figure out where your kids need to be going. But let me just ask you this. When we talk about retention rates, and if you really look at, because I did look up the retention rates for San Diego City College as it relates to all community colleges across the state of California, and then also just across the U.S. itself. So let's talk about retention and graduation rates and the importance of that as it relates to funding that the college is getting. So let's start with retention rates and where your college stands at this particular time. And then let's move on to talk about graduation rates, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll tackle both of them in both a global way and a specific way, right? So we certainly have some work to do with our retention rate, and the pandemic has only exacerbated those things. I think if I could, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, but it is important that we have a conversation on what is an educated society. What is it? What is an educated student? Because the metrics that are used to determine retention rates really don't tell the entire story. Let me give an example. Let's take our machining program, for example, and it's booming in San Diego and surrounding areas for manufacturing. Well, a student might come in and take one or two of our 6-class machining program, and they'll get a job in an above livable wage career where that student won't necessarily show up in our retention or our completion rate. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because the ultimate goal of a community college, one of them, in fact, is either to transfer our students and or to place them in an above livable wage career. And so when you look at our career education programs, which we have a number of great programs, cosmetology, machining, HVAC, electronics, many of those students, they're coming to us with families. In fact, the average student at San Diego City College is registered in less than 6 units. You know, it takes 12 units to be a full-time student. Well, that's a working adult, often with a family, certainly with children. And so some of those students, many of them, in fact, don't want to go to school as long as I did, 12 or 13 years. They're coming to us to enter, either to stay in, promote, or get into a high demand career. Those students, because of the way the metrics is developed, won't ever really show up in our retention or our completion rate. But when they do show up is when they tell us that, you know what, Dr. Shabazz, I came in and I took these 2 machining classes, I took these 2 HVAC classes, and now I either promoted in my industry, or now I went from making $19 an hour, now I'm making $30 or $40 an hour. And so we really have to unpack how the retention numbers are generated. We have to unpack how the completion numbers are generated, because ultimately my role as a college president, one of them is to aid students in transferring. The other is to aid students into entering high wage fulfilling careers. And I can assure you we're doing that. And I can assure you that unfortunately the way that the Department of Labor statistics work, those things will never show up. That Gloria came as a woman with 2 children who just got off of welfare, was working in an unfulfilling job, you know, making a low wage. She came and got into a career technical program or a transfer program at City College, and now Gloria is making 2 times the amount. Now she has benefits. Now she has retirement. Unfortunately, Gloria would never show up in our data for completion. Now, we do have some work to do, and the work is both internally and externally around the way that retention numbers are generated.
Wow. Now that's really, really interesting. It would even be more interesting to do, and you may do this, knowing you probably already do this, but then what that follow-up is, just following where that those individuals are, you know what I'm saying? So they took a class or 2, they got a much better paying job, and yet because it leads me into talking about decreasing the dropout rate for these students. So what is that follow up? And what I mean by that, you know how some employers will say, look, we will give you time off, or we'll pay for you, and maybe I'm thinking way too much out the box, but I'm thinking, just think about that. If your employer gave you the opportunity, you know, to from 4 to 5 or 4 to 6, say your class starts at 5, but we're going to let you off at 4 o'clock, and you go, and so you take that one class, even if it's one class a semester, it will ultimately lead you to getting your degree and to moving on. I don't know how much follow-up, or even if you have the bandwidth to be able to do that or reach out to employers for something like that.
Yeah, and we do, and there are a number of partnerships we have with agencies like NAVWAR, which is the largest civilian branch of the military, and a host of other industries where we have partnerships like that. Certainly, we also have online classes that are hybrid. If you look at our statistics for graduation, they have significantly been improving over the last 3 or 4 years. And as you described, Laura, many of our students are doing exactly achieving their education exactly as you mapped out, 1 or 2 or 3 classes at a time. And we frankly are okay with that because people need to work on their own pace. And San Diego is a very expensive place to live. So people also need to work. And so we don't necessarily serve a student who is a full-time out of high school 18, 19-year-old. The average age of a student at San Diego City College is actually over 26 years old, which is likely to be someone who has lived life and coming to us to either transfer or complete some type of certificate so that they can access upward mobility into the middle class.
Mm. Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much for really expounding and talking about that. But for those who are listening, those in education, you guys need to consider some of these things Dr. Shabazz is saying, because I think that it's really important. And we all know that with the education, what it does for us and how it elevates and takes us to another level. And that's one of the things that I feel is really key. But look, let me go back to something, talk about the pandemic. During the pandemic in the last year, and you shared with a lot of things of being out there, and I love that you're out on the campus in the community, right? But what have you yourself learned about leadership? You talked about Janelle and her response, but what have you learned about yourself and leadership and encouraging leadership in others?
That a good leader has to listen, right?
Mm,
I think the saying is seek first to understand before you seek to be
to be
understood.
understood. Yeah.
And so I really had to go back and talk to people and to listen. And it's something that I instilled in my vice presidents and my deans that, look, cancel these meetings. Like we can't be sitting in meetings for 6, 7, 8 hours a day. We've got to get out and touch the lives of the people who we work with. And I'm happy to report I have such amazing vice presidents and deans and managers. They put together a welcome back week for our employees. And it was on and cracking. We had line dancing, we had petting dogs, we had free coffee. And that's that city college love that I was talking about.
Yes.
And there's just certain things that we did very well in a Zoom and a remote environment. My folks are resilient, and they showed that they're resilient. They showed that city college love in a remote and a hybrid manner. But they also showed that as humans, we need to be around one another.
Wow.
And so we brought folks back a little over a month ago, and it kicked off with a welcome back week. We brought in Taco Tuesday, Taco Wednesday, and we played music, and we reassociated ourselves with our colleagues. Most of us spend, if not an equal amount, more amount of time at work, right? That's where that whole term work wife, work husband, not in a literal sense, but in a figurative sense, that's where those things come from, which says that our folks we work with, hopefully, is a family. And at City College, we are a family. And so I learned how important it is to build and maintain relationships. And so I did things like take our classified professionals, our frontline folks, once a month. I take 3 or 4 of them out to dinner or lunch. They get to choose a location, and I just check on them. How are you doing? What are we doing right? What are we jacking at? What did we miss? And we listen, and the things that we can do and we can fix, we fix. And let me say, in doing this over the last 2 years, I haven't received anything that I thought was unusual or unreasonable. I work with some great professionals that are reasonable. Hey, Ricky, we really needed to do this, or we really needed to do that, and we just did it. I tell my vice presidents, and this is probably not the most politically correct thing to do because I'm not a traditional president anyways. I just tell my folks, look, push the button. Like if somebody needs something, sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. And as if no one died, if it's not illegal, because we're not doing nothing illegal, then just do it. Like you don't need permission to do something that's the right thing to do. And it's a safe space. And you talked about leadership. Let me also say this. There was a time in my life where I was accused of only doing things that I thought would work. Well, when you're living through a pandemic, you got to take risks, but you've got to be in an environment that is supportive of people taking calculated risks. So we took some risks, and many of those things paid off. Now, we missed some things. We missed the plexiglass, but as soon as we got wind of it, we corrected it. And so there were some things that we did wrong, but we did so many more things right that it overshadowed the things that we did wrong. And so being in a safe, loving, supportive environment, giving your managers and your classified, like, we don't do titles, right? If you want to get into this line of work and being a CEO, because I am a president CEO of over close to $100 million dollar business. Education is a form of business, nonprofit. We don't have a profit motive. Our product are our students, and I would even say our product are our employees, and having a great environment at the college. And so, we're in an environment that is supportive, that is loving, that generates hope, not only for our students, but our employees. We launched a series of career pathways we promote. So we're always encouraging folks to continue their own education with this understanding that if we invest in our employees, they're likely to invest in our students, because I can't speak to every student. And so what we try to do is instill that hope and that love in each other so that we can exude it to the other folks who come on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, what you're talking about is, it's not really that hard to do. I think one of the things, and I say that in this sense, people who are caught up with titles, you just touched on that, then they aren't able to be open and receptive to a lot of things that people who are in the trenches are dealing with day in and day out. And I love the fact that you say, hey, look, let's get away from the boardroom. It always blows my mind. I love watching that show, Undercover Boss. You shouldn't have to go undercover to really find out what's happening with your employees, right? But sometimes it takes that for people to have a light shined on the things that are not being done to make the job easier, or better yet, to really understand your customer base. And in your case, you know what? They're your customers, whether it's your VPs, whether it's your admin staff, and even so much as the students that are there. These are your customers. And I think that people forget that so much. So I love the fact that you think that way, because I believe that that's exactly what will cause us to blow up. And when I say blow up, meaning be positive, have a lot of great things. And as a result of your leadership and your thinking outside of the box, look at what's happening.
Yeah, and I would also say this, like, we just have fun. Like, I look forward to going to work, right? If you're being honest, don't you want to work at a place where if you're going to spend 8 hours, or in my case, 12 or 13, sometimes 14 hours at a place, right, I want to have fun. I don't want to go to a place that I dread going, don't like nobody, got rocks in my mouth. Like, a smile is attracting. So just saying hi, like, I literally love where I work, and I literally hang out with the people who I work with. Yeah. And I would if I worked there or not. And there are very few places. Like, there's a line of people trying to come work for my college. There are not a line of people trying to leave my college.
Right.
And it's because of the environment. And let me also say this. It's not because of me. They were that way before I got there. And so it made it easier for me to be my authentic self. Like, what you see is what you get. Any college that would hire, a young cat with the name Ricky Shabazz to be their president is already a very unique place. I work with some amazing people who know the student population. And let me say, the student population is not the San Diego that the tourists get to see. The majority of my students come from Southeast San Diego, and you would not go there as a tourist unless you took a wrong turn. It is the most deserving part of San Diego, with the lowest socioeconomic status. Some of my students are coming from TJ because they can't afford to live in San Diego. Some of my employees, my colleagues, live in San Diego because they can't afford. And so my students don't live in the high-rise buildings that are surrounding the campus. And let me also say that we have an amazing board of trustees and a chancellor that have invested nearly $700 million in our campus. So when people come to our campus, as we would say, don't get it twisted. The students are coming from areas of San Diego that don't look like the campus. And the board thought enough of our campus and the students that we serve so that when they do get to campus, they come to a campus that they can be proud of.
Look, what can I say? You leave me speechless. That's kind of hard to do. When you talk about being speechless. But look, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, let's talk about what efforts are in place to grow San Diego City College, your resource space. So you guys, you are watching the You Didn't Get the Memo show with my awesome guest, Dr. Ricky Shabazz, and I'm the host, Gloria Bailey Ray. Guys, don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made her college years happen. Opening that education savings account when she was little. Spearheading a campus tour. And another, and another, and another, and another. Bam! Deciphering financial aid. She was like, what? Well, now she's like, you aced planning for college. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org. Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made home ownership happen. Homeschooling yourself on loans, beefing up your credit score.
So I'm pre-approved.
You were like, yes! Sorry. Color coding listings, ticking boxes, and flushing every toilet in a 20-mile radius. Home sweet home. You aced house hunting. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
All right, guys, I want to thank you so much for hanging in here with us and with my awesome guest, Dr. Ricky Shabazz, president of the San Diego City College. We're having a great discussion, you guys, about ownership. And it's really and truly about you owning your future and what it is that you need to do. Before we went to break, one of the things that I asked Dr. Shabazz, and I need to just tell you, you're right, we could talk. We could talk a lot because you're on to some really great things. And I know our time is limited. But before we went to break, I just asked a question to talk a little bit about what efforts are in place in terms of growing San Diego City College resource base.
Yeah, so we have the San Diego City College Foundation that has been in place since the 70s. I've spent my first 3 or 4 years as a president rebuilding the board. So we have an amazing board for the nonprofit arm, even though the college is already a nonprofit arm. The San Diego City College Foundation, which I am not a member, but I assist with, is the fundraising arm of the college. And we recently received a number of grants, a planning grant in the neighborhood of $250,000 to build out our foundation. The foundation currently doesn't have employees, so we're in the process of hiring an executive director. But I am happy to report that foundation provides over $200,000 annually in student financial aid in the form of scholarships. We also provide emergency grants and book loans. Our largest donors are really, there are 3 donors that comprise our largest donors. The employees of San Diego City College are so generous and loving of our students that they do payroll deduction. We also have the Friends of Downtown, which is a nonprofit itself that has been providing for the last 10 or 15 years roughly about $60,000 to $80,000 worth of scholarships for our students. So that's over $500,000 that the Friends of Downtown has provided scholarships to our very deserving students. And then lastly, I mentioned Jim Senegal, one of the founders of Costco, has really beefed up his contributions to our college last year, providing over $300,000 that went in the way of scholarships and computers and Wi-Fi hubs. And so we have a very aggressive plan to raise money. In addition to raising money, we have a number of efforts underway for paid internships, folks. College students, particularly community colleges,
huge.
And so we launched an effort with an organization called NAVWAR. I mentioned it earlier. It's the civilian branch of the military, where our engineering and computer science students are being placed there, making upwards of $30 an hour while they complete their bachelor's degrees. So there are a number of efforts underway to raise more money. We have a number of federal grants that we write. Matter of fact, my folks are writing 3 grants right now. So we tend to bring in millions of dollars in the way of either fundraising or writing grants. But there's still a lot of work to be done. That is one of the focal points that, we call it for philanthropy. That is one of the focal points of my role as the president.
Yeah. Okay. So when you talk about your role, let's just continue to move into what are your long range goals for San Diego City College at this point?
Yeah, so one of the long range goals I mentioned, and that is to have both student and employee housing to the tune of about 1,000 units. We are going through a facilities master plan, and we've identified a location on our campus where we can build housing. And I would love to offer housing for our veterans, our formerly incarcerated, our foster youth, and several other very deserving students who attend our campus. I would also like to offer housing to some of our lowest paid employees, folks who work in places like facilities and maintenance. And so that is one of the legacy pieces that I hope to be able to leave the college before I retire from the college. The other thing that we're working on is a bachelor's degree. There is no reason that a California community college should not be able to offer a bachelor's degree. The state piloted the bachelor's degree several years ago. They've opened it up now so that more community colleges can offer a bachelor's degree. So our great faculty are working on 2 potential areas to build out a bachelor's degree so that our students who largely are not interested in leaving San Diego, and I don't blame them. I'm not interested in leaving San Diego. But when you look at San Diego State and UC San Diego, they're very impacted 4-year colleges. So it can be a challenge for our students to gain admission. They're admissible, but San Diego State only takes so many transfer students annually compared to their number of freshmen that they admit into the college. So we're working on bachelor's degrees. And I am just really working on maintaining the family atmosphere around love and ensuring that our employees are having the same great experience that our students are having when they come to colleges. So those are really the priorities: offering housing, building out the San Diego Foundation, so we're raising more funds, hiring amazing professionals to come to our City College family, and offering a bachelor's degree so that our students can stay at the college and continue our focus on social justice and have a high quality, low cost bachelor's degree.
Right. That was going to be one of my questions. Okay, if they stay there and they're able to get a bachelor's degree, does that mean that they're going to be paying tuition as it would be if they were in a 4-year institution? And that's really good to know, because I think one of the things that, and I think you would agree with me, I don't know, but education itself is costing so much for, and people are saying, well, I went to college and I had tons of student loans, but yet how can you get a foothold? Me too. And you can only imagine just knowing what that cost looks like. And so you come out of college, but you're so strapped with debt that it's really, really difficult for you to even get a handle and a stronghold on managing that. So me personally, I think community colleges at least should be free or basically the cost is so low that people can say, yeah, I can go there and I can deal with it. So to hear you talk about that, I think that that's it's commendable, and I applaud you. And I know that you're going to succeed with that because you got the right, as they say, you got the right stuff, right? You got all of those ingredients that are working together that will make things work. So when we talk about, and you kind of led into it, but if there are any challenges that you would say that your school is facing currently, what are those, and what are you doing to kind of offset it or to deal with that?
Yeah, so enrollment is down for all community colleges across the nation. So enrollment is what we do, right? We have to have students to educate in order to have a highly functioning community college. So I'm not concerned about our enrollment. It is down, probably 10%. But we have an amazing marketing department and even more amazing outreach department. So I'm not really worried about enrollment more than I am that we design our college to meet the needs of our students. And what I mean by that is that the majority of our students are part-time, and our support services aren't necessarily designed for part-time students. Now, that doesn't mean we don't support part-time students. That means we're having conversations about intentional efforts around supporting part-time students. And what does that look like? And we have offices like admissions and records, financial aid, our amazing counseling department, who during the pandemic have implemented very innovative strategies. So we want to maintain those strategies that says, look, if I'm a working adult and I'm taking classes in the evening, why does the office have to be open from 8 to 5? I may want to see someone at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. And consequently, we may have an employee who is raising their own children who may say, look, I don't want to work a traditional 8 to 5. My children go to bed at 9 or 10. If I can work from 9 to 10. So I actually think there's some positive things that have come out of the pandemic that are going to thrust us into some discussions that 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, traditionally, we would not have had. So the work schedule is something that is an opportunity, but that I'm concerned about because we cannot have a one-size-fits-all college or form of education or work schedule because very real lives. And so the pandemic has brought to the forefront an opportunity to have a discussion about support services during times that meet the needs of the students. Imagine that. But we're also in a place where the employees who largely want to work remote, and I'm supportive of people working remote.
Right, right.
We're a brick and mortar college, though. So that means, you may be able to work remote 1 or 2 days a week while still serving students on campus. Because here's the thing, the student population that my college serves needs some help to get to the point where they can get online.
Right.
Right. So they need to come to campus to use the internet. They need to come to campus to use a computer. They need to come to campus to have someone train them how to navigate our system to the point that then they learn, then they can be turned over to someone who is working from home remotely at a range of hours to support those students. And so the perfect world would be a hybrid model where you have people working remotely and you have people on campus. Now, staffing, of course, in every office is not universal. You may have one office that has one person. You may have an office like admission and records that has 20 people. And so trying to navigate the scheduling to meet the needs of our students first, but also not downplaying that we also want to meet the needs of our employees who may have an elderly parent at home, who may have children at home. And so that is probably the biggest challenge that we're facing, is how do we bring people back to work? How do we acknowledge the innovation that we did launch during the pandemic? How do we acknowledge that some offices, not all, can in fact work remotely? And how do we have this discussion that is rooted in equity and not equality? Very often people confuse those two things.
I agree with you, definitely. Equity versus equality. And we see that a lot. And still, I think that people get that confused. So you got a lot of things going on, Ricky.
Just a couple.
Just a couple, you think? So, you know what? But I love the fact that you're acknowledging, with the pandemic, things are not, I hear people say this, things will never go back to the normal, the way
This
that,
is our normal.
exactly. And so with that, I think that there are different skill sets that are going to need to be employed in order to really be a dynamic leader. So that leads me to asking you this question. In your opinion, what skills will it take to lead change in a dynamic environment? And you are functioning in a really dynamic environment, but you also have your own set of things that are different nuances to what it is that you do. So in your opinion, if you could speak to that, what do you think are those skills that will be needed in order to lead into a new normal, so to speak?
Yeah, the first one remains listening. You have to be open to feedback, to criticism, and you have to empathize with people, with yourself, with your family, with the community. And I believe a byproduct of listening is, in fact, empathy. You have to be flexible, right? This pandemic has taught us we have to be flexible. You have to be approachable, and being approachable is a skill set. If people don't think, sometimes we think we're approachable, but if people not approaching you, then usually that means you're not approachable. Another skill is you have to do things like we're doing right now. As a college president, I realized I was writing these lengthy, and I'm a creative writer. I'm actually a writer. And so I'd write these amazing emails and newsletters, and nobody was reading them. And so we pivoted to video. And I started doing these videos, 2-minute, 1-minute videos in different places on campus, no suit or tie, lifting people up, acknowledging the great work. And I started getting emails. Oh, that was great. It was good to see. And it was good to learn about this. And it was good to live, and so one of the skills is being a Gen Xer, right? I'm between a millennial and a boomer. It's a skill set for a leader to recognize that there are 4 or 5 generations in the workplace at the same time. And when we're having this great resignation where folks are leaving, a lot of baby boomers who could leave are leaving the work space, there's an information or knowledge gap. So another skill set is succession planning. Who are the movers and shakers in your organization, and how are you training them up? So we have a Career Pathways Institute. And in fact, I'm launching an effort around career pathways specifically for, but not exclusive to, but specifically for Latinas, Black women, and Asian Pacific Islander women. Education is dominated by women. Most of my students are women. Most of my employees are women. And what I'm finding is a lot of these women have never been mentored, never had someone invest in their future. And so I'm developing some trainings, at least to give them exposure to the knowledge and the competencies that are necessary for them to achieve career upward mobility. And so those are skill sets, is to say, okay, where are my gaps, and how do I begin to develop leaders within my organization so that people have fulfillment, so that hopefully they don't leave your organization.
Right. Oh my. Okay. So look, we're going to take, and when I say a really, really quick break, a really, really quick break. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you, Ricky, to share with our viewers, what is it that you want them watching the show today to take away? So guys, don't go anywhere. This is some really important, as they say, it's some good stuff. We'll be right back.
Thank you for watching the You Didn't Get the Memo show with your inspirational host, Gloria Bailey Ray. It's your contributions that make this happen. To become a sponsor, send an email to youdidn'tgetthememo@gmail. That's the letter U, didn't get the memo. If you're not in a space to be a sponsor, but you like what you hear, we simply ask that you support what you like by making a contribution to the show. There are 3 ways to make an online donation. Visit paypal.me/Gloria Bailey Ray or Cash App or Venmo, Gloria Bailey Ray. Give what you can. Your support is appreciated.
All right, guys, I want to thank you so much for hanging in here. As always, the time goes far too quickly when you're having fun.
A
And
lot
I
of fun.
can tell you, my guest has just, I mean, whoa, talk about just dropping knowledge and sharing information. We will definitely have to have you come back, Dr.
I would
Shabazz,
love
on the
to. Be my
show.
honor.
Yes. And so before we went to break, I always like to ask this of my guests, what is it that you want people watching the show to take away from today, please?
Yeah, the takeaway is this. The community college has long been a place where Black, Latino, first generation, low income, formerly incarcerated. I could go down the litany of categories. We have long been the place where most people access education to be able to access the middle class. There was a time when community colleges were looked at as the place that people went who didn't do good in high school. Those days are long gone. You mentioned free education. With the absorbent cost of college education, your students really should be starting at a community college. They will get personalized attention. They'll have smaller class sizes. They'll have less college debt. They'll be able to complete their degree sooner. And so the takeaway is that the community college really is the driver for our economy. It is the driver to access a upper middle class, highly fulfilling career. And it is the place to go if you want to see people who come from similar backgrounds, similar lived experiences, and who really love changing the lives of students. And so invest in your community college, consider a community college. In the state of California and many other states, there's a push for community colleges to be free again. Most students will be able to come to my college for little or no tuition, if not free at all. And so it is time for folks to start acknowledging the role that community colleges play in allowing Black and Brown and other students to be able to access an affordable education, a high quality education. My professors who work at our faculty who work at City College also teach at four-year universities, the same folks. But what they do is they have smaller class sizes, more personalized attention. And so give the community college a look. If your students, if you have children who are considering going to college, if you have someone who doesn't want to go to college for as long as I did, there are also very viable certificate programs that people will earn just as much, if not more, than someone who has a bachelor's, master's, or a doctorate. And so I conclude with this. Someone who comes to my college and transfers is just as important as someone who comes to my college and gets a welding certificate, gets an HVAC certificate, gets a cosmetology certificate, or one of the other countless certificate programs that they can come into a semester, a year, 2 years of community college and go into a above livable wage, fulfilling career. So community colleges are where it's at. And that's why I choose to work at a community college.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Shabazz, I don't want you to go anywhere. Okay. You stay right there. I want to say to all of you guys, I want to thank you again so much for tuning in and watching the show. It is always my hope and my belief and my prayer that something was said that will impact you in a very, very positive way. After all, I always say, if you didn't take anything away from today's show, then it's really you who didn't get the memo. Until this time next week, guys, remember this: to be kind, to pay it forward, and to always give thanks for all of the many blessings that have been bestowed upon you, and in many cases, whether deserved or not. Just remember to be well. And until this time, next week, tune in to You Didn't Get the Memo. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray. God bless you. Take care.